Welcome to Tales from the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Mick West. Today's guest is Willie. Willie is the person that I interviewed for the preface of my book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole. He has a very interesting story. He used to be a very strong believer in a lot of conspiracies, including the chemtrails conspiracy theory. And he eventually found his way out, in part with thanks to the people in Metabunk, but also on other forums like Above Top Secret. He has a very interesting story about how he got in and out of the rabbit hole, and he shares some interesting thoughts on how his perspective has changed since he escaped the rabbit hole. So Willie, welcome to Tales from the Rabbit Hole.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Very good to see you again. This is the first time I've actually seen you. We talked on the phone when I interviewed you 2 years ago today, you say it was.
Yep, exactly to the day. It's kind of a funny coincidence.
Yeah. And of course, you are the person who is the prologue to my book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole. And you're the interview I did with you then, and the kind of the little mini chapter that I wrote about it, I think really set the tone for the book. And,
it's cool. It worked out like that.
Yeah, it did. Some people actually, they asked me if you were a made-up person.
Nope.
Or some people asked if you were me. Like, some people thought that I was writing this prologue as if, I'm telling my own story. And of course, they're nothing at all like me.
Right. No. No.
It was really, really great to have your story, I think, to open the book. So let's kind of kind of wanted to touch base with you because it's been 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, maybe just we'll go through the story again, and then just see,
Sure.
Has that anything changed, and what's how your perspective has changed, and how it fit in with the other things that we've learned since then.
Okay, the short version of that story starts with me getting into the chemtrail conspiracy theory through Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was probably in the mid to late 90s, and I think it was probably Dane Wigington coming on the show, or somebody else. I remember back then it was more talk about chemtrails are either for mind control or making people sick through Morgellons disease or something like that. It was kind of something that I used as entertainment. I was living in a cabin in the woods, and AM radio was like the one kind of source of information that I could get there. And and as I mentioned, or in your book, it says, I at some point kind of got tired of waking up every morning scared to death of that the world's going to end, basically. And now I see that stuff as a type of fear porn is what some people call that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was in the early 90s. Then I kind of had more connections to what the conspiracy theory was doing at the time of like 99 or 2000 through a website called what the heck was it called? The history.
What really happened?
Yeah, what really happened?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that guy, he was kind of an aggregator of other conspiracy theories. Like he linked to rents, and he linked to the early days of Prison Planet, or that whole
Alex Jones.
yeah, that whole thing, and it was for me. I hadn't had much experience with computers or the internet, and I only had a few little places that I went to. So it was like my local newspaper, and I commented to people there, and then like maybe Yahoo News or something, and then this conspiracy site, which seemed like to be giving me, alternative information that I don't know. It seemed kind of real at the time. And the interesting thing about my story was the thing that led me furthest down the rabbit hole was the thing that also got me out. And that was ballast tank pictures. And And so, and I was on the Above Top Secret forum. I don't think I was a signed in person. I was just observing conversations there. But by
Right.
this time, I had seen one day on What Really Happened. They said they presented the ballast tanks as smoking gun evidence. So now I know that's called priming, and like, like, hey, you're gonna get this information, and it's gonna be smoking gun evidence, and then you see it, and they're like, oh, yeah, that worked on me.
Like the
and
headlines that they put, like,
exactly.
yeah.
And so I believed it, and I just swallowed that. And I was like, there was a moment. I've heard other people in your podcast kind of describe that, like Paul describes it, and he says, oh, this is real. And that's what it
Hmm.
seemed like to me too. Like, oh, this is really real. There's the visual evidence. I've been told it's smoking gun. I'm looking at it. It looks like smoking gun evidence to me. And it didn't change my life in any great way. I didn't go around telling everybody that the sky is falling, but I would like mention that stuff like in comments. Like if I'd sign off on a comment, I'd say stuff like, 9/11 was the inside job, which I believe that stuff too. But one day on Above Top Secret, somebody showed the sources of the tank pictures. They're from an aviation
Uh-huh.
website. And it's clear to me that someone had either didn't know the source of that information, or they had done the cropping themselves and cropped out the copyright, don't share this type stuff. And so all of a sudden, I now have the thought that the conspiracy theorist people are lying
Hmm.
or misrepresenting the facts. And and then the one other thing that kind of was helpful with that was, and I don't think I mentioned this in the book, was I was doing some counseling with. He's a Jungian counselor here in town, and I had just gotten some money when my grandmother passed away, and I thought it'd be a good idea just to get some counseling. Not because I was having any major problems in my life, but I had read a lot of Jung, and I thought that those were kind of cool ideas, and I thought that maybe since I had this little extra money, I could spend some on making myself more individuated.
Hmm.
And so we were talking one day, and he mentioned something like how he said he characterized the town of Olympia as full of woo. And I thought for a minute, I hadn't really ever heard that description. And this is a guy that I looked up to, and seems like, I enjoyed talking with him. And so I kind of gave him some credulity, I guess, or something. And I
Uh-huh.
thought to myself, well, yeah, there is a lot of strange, belief in here. It's like, earwax candles.
Yeah, and like
and,
we
and
start out in the book, like the second sentence was his hometown was, as he puts it, a very liberal hippy dippy kind of community.
exactly. Which it is. And there's all kinds of alternative health things going
Yeah.
on. And, that's great. It creates a whole industry, and people who wouldn't have these pretty cool jobs now have jobs doing this stuff that may or may not have provable effects. But it's, and so there's stuff like that as acupuncture, or, gosh, I don't want to like offend people, but
Yeah.
anyway, there's lots of alternative type of stuff going on around here. But the effect, so just the cool thing about what it was for me was people say no one ever has ever changed anybody's mind online, but that's not true, at least
Mm-hmm.
for my case. And it wasn't from being involved in any kind of discussion. I was not signed in and commenting. I know we've both gone back and trying to find the thread, and I can't find it. But it doesn't matter, because all that had to happen was I was an observer, and I saw this happen, and my mind changed almost instantly. And then I found your website after that, because someone in the thread was either from Metabunk or it was you, I don't know. And then I found Metabunk, and after that, I spent a couple of years going through all the forums, looking at all the different threads. I mean, the passport thread is still, I think, one of the coolest threads on that whole site. And then, so I kind of started with this new kind of skeptical attitude. And probably dove right into that, maybe foolishly, thinking that this is some way that's going to, I'm going to be able to debunk myself to the truth. But things like the word truth or the word belief now are really complicated for me to talk about.
Mm.
And for example, like I talk to people now about conspiracy theories, and it's takes a lot of them aback when I say I used to play for your team. I understand that you think I'm a shill and stuff like that. And a lot of them are they can't even believe. They
Yeah,
say no
yeah.
one that goes down the rabbit hole ever comes back out, or um, they just find it to be kind of they can't believe it. It's hard to
I
believe.
hear that a lot, actually. And when I was doing my original research for the book, I went on one of the 9/11 forums and I asked, are there any former 9/11 truthers here who would like to talk to me for my book? And people would say, you will never find a former 9/11 truther
Yeah,
because once your mind is open to this reality, then you can never go back. And I think that's
that's not
something
true.
that I know is certainly not true because I know lots of former 9/11 truthers.
Yeah,
A lot of the people who are interviewed in the book are former 9/11 truthers, and people do stop being 9/11 truthers. My last interview was with a guy who didn't really stop believing; he just stopped kind of
got
doing the
tired.
activism. But I kind of feel like give him another 10 years, maybe he'll stop believing too. But it's interesting. You kind of said at one point, just earlier, just now, that you kind of woke up and you were tired of feeling scared about being scared that the world was going to end
Yeah,
all the
that's not what
time.
got me out. I still was
No,
just scared.
yeah, it's you still recognize though that it was a negative thing, like these apocalyptic ideas.
Yeah, but you make trade-offs though, because you're like, well, yes, I know this heavy knowledge, but also I know this heavy knowledge and no one else does, and like it kind of feels good. Paul described it as it's like a drug. I think I use some of the same languages.
Yeah,
I think that's common feeling.
yeah. Somebody contacted me recently, like a young college kid, like he was like 17 or 18, and he was telling me like he keeps having all these thoughts about conspiracies and fears about the end of the world, and he wanted me to try to stop it. But the way he was talking, it was almost like he knew it was like a drug to him. He couldn't
Yeah,
stop it because he kept getting drawn back in. His mind kept going to that place, even though he didn't really want to. He recognized it was a negative thing, but it was like, but what about this? What about this? It's kind of like hypochondriacs as well. People who are always looking up their illnesses on the internet and then thinking, oh
yeah.
yeah, I've got a bump on my arm. What is it? It's cancer. I don't feel well. I've got some disease. Like people, it's your mind kind of gets sucked into these ways of thinking, and it's very very difficult to get out.
Yeah, I just discovered I sent you a link on Facebook to a group called what's it called? Something debunked. It's like the end of the world debunked.
Yeah.
Doomsday.
Oh
Doomsday
yeah.
debunked. And it's a similar thing. It's like people go there because they want to have their fears taken away. There's like
Mm-hmm.
this guy that responds to all of them with some great information, and he just explains, this is how they get their reporting wrong, and it's usually like just too much fear mongering about ice melting on the polar caps and stuff like that. And so yeah, I think it does do harm. I've often heard people say, well, what does it matter what I believe? How it's not hurting anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a whole scale of how it does hurt people, from all the way up to the Pizzagate shooter guy, down to simple things with relationships with friends and family getting worse off.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, definitely. And just for the individual, like the people who are just afraid of things, it can be this
exactly.
kind of crippling fear. This kid I was talking to, he was actually, I think he was going to college, like starting at college, and this is something that when you're a 17, 18-year-old kid, if you're spending all your time worrying about the coming apocalypse in the next year or two, your college is going to suffer. you're not going to be
Yeah.
able to get on with life. So it's going to be very, very damaging to the individual. Sure, like if you're just some retired person sat at home occasionally reading about 9/11 theories just for entertainment, yeah, that may be fine. But for a lot of people, it's very, very real and it's very, very impactful on their lives.
It's also wasteful. I mean, just it's really wasteful. Like there's all these people very concerned about 9/11 still,
Hmm.
and they could be, channeling that, or chemtrails could be channeling that into, global climate change activism instead of, you know,
Yeah, there's all
this.
these real problems.
Yeah,
Even if some people if they're very suspicious conspiratorial people, a lot of the times they don't believe climate change is real. But there's lots of, even if they're not going to get straight into that, there's lots of very real issues in, whatever country you're in. Like in America, there's problems with corruption. There's
yeah,
problems with the way elections work. There's problems with corporations like starting to have an undue influence. Like, and if people can focus more on real issues like that, that's part of the
yeah,
reason I do it. I see all these people getting distracted, and they're often people who are very eloquent people.
yeah.
Like if you
It's
look at
true.
like Dane Wigington,
He blocked me.
he's he speaks very persuasively.
Yeah,
Especially if you believe the subject matter that he's talking about, then he speaks very persuasively and he gets people riled up and he gets people organized and he does things, but he's kind of wasting his life by going down this rabbit hole of covert geoengineering where he thinks that these planes are spraying things in the sky. And if he could really contribute to the world in a much more positive way if he actually was focusing on something that was real rather than something that wasn't.
yeah. He. I think you know way more about him, but I think I've read that he kind of doesn't really believe in what he's selling. He's selling stuff kind of from his website, right?
No, I don't think he actually makes money from what he
Oh,
does. I
okay.
think he actually is a genuine true believer.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think perhaps he might. I wouldn't say lie exactly, but he really does avoid debunkings. Like if you explain something to him, he won't even give it the time of day. Like he has
No,
these
he blocked.
claims.
I
He
tried to
block.
like do some
Yeah,
debunking on his Facebook page, and he blocked me without even saying anything.
there's like things like there's the ballast barrels that we were talking about earlier. This is this famous photograph of some barrels in a plane that everyone says they're full of chemicals. This is what the
Right.
chemtrails are sprayed from. And there's all these different ones. And actually, I just saw that come up today. Somebody on Twitter mentioned that she'd seen a photograph of Donald Trump on a chem plane with barrels.
Yeah, I think I've seen that
Yeah, and
somewhere
there's this
too.
photo. It's just him is examining the latest. I don't know where it is, like um, 787 or something like that. And
Yeah.
it's because it's a prototype plane. It has these ballast barrels on it, which are just full of water that they use for weight and balance. But it's still going.
Yeah.
You saw this thing back like in the early 2000s or something like that.
It was in 2013.
Oh,
Um,
2013. Okay.
yeah, 2012
Yeah,
or
early.
2013, I
All
think.
right.
And yeah, I can't find it again, but I think you've mentioned elsewhere that this stuff will always just keep coming back up, and you just got to be
Yeah.
patient and just show people the other information. And a lot of what has really resonated to me about your book is, well, and your website. First is the politeness factor. That is
Mhm.
a huge thing that that surprises people because everybody's used to getting flamed online and be called names. And so, number one, I think that's super effective. And the other thing that's super effective is how you kind of say that it's not useful to even like think of people who believe in conspiracy theorists as having a mental problem
Mm.
or not being smart or anything like that. That it's just a situation where they just don't have all the information that they might find useful. And the way you describe staying in contact with someone over a long time and just being there to, have a continuing conversation. Well, I've kind of tried to adopt that with the conversations that I have to various friends who are down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I also liken it to the guy who invented, I think it's Tai Chi, and I think his name is Ip Man. He has this little saying that kind of outlines the philosophy behind Tai Chi, which is like a sticky hand type of martial arts where you stick your hands right out and get the guy. Yeah. And it's greet what arrives, escort what leaves, and rush upon loss of contact. And I use that as a way to kind of maintain the conversations. Like someone will send me a conspiracy theory, and want me to comment on it. Usually, because I have kind of this ongoing challenge with some of my friends, like I'm not aware of a conspiracy theory which turned out to be true, is basically what I'm saying. Because I want to be proven wrong, number one, because there's got to be, one out there. The closest that I can come up with is maybe the case of Gary Webb, the guy who was reporting on the CIA drug running, and he was writing for a small newspaper. And are you familiar with that guy?
I think I've heard it because there was a film made.
There was a film made, and I think he ended up committing suicide, and that's like the closest I can find to something that it was a conspiracy theory. Then later we found out it was true, and I don't even know.
A lot of people bring up conspiracies that were discovered later, but
that's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, no, because that's what people don't understand. A conspiracy theory has to have been theorized about at some point for it to be a conspiracy theory. If it's just something you discover later, that's just a conspiracy that you discover later. Right. Conspiracy theories where everybody's going, oh well, whatever, Nixon is taping people in the hotel. No one was making theories about that. No one was doing theories about what was going on there until some evidence cropped up. I suppose you could kind of say that Watergate for a while might have been considered a conspiracy theory. There was some evidence that something was going on, and Nixon was denying wrongdoing. So, but it's not really a conspiracy theory. That's just more like here's the facts, and you're kind of about to be indicted or you're going to trial. It's not like every single trial doesn't involve a conspiracy theory. It's a different type of thing. So
Brian Dunning has like his thing is the Skeptoid Media, and he's got a page that are 8 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true ? And then goes through and kind of tells the story basically, like the Tuskegee Airmen. Well, that's like you were saying, that's not a conspiracy theory that turned out to be a conspiracy. It's just a conspiracy that was real.
The syphilis thing, not the airmen.
Oh, was it? The syphilis thing. And then, he talks about Martin Luther King. The guy basically was a racist with the gun that shot him. There's no conspiracy. Yes, the government was spying on him, but that wasn't the conspiracy theory. And I guess the guy wrote a book about it, which somebody's told me explains this conspiracy theory, but the guy was trying to make money off of it, and so I'm pretty skeptical of that. I'm skeptical of everything nowadays.
Well, I wrote a book, so just because people write books, I didn't think you should automatically be skeptical of them.
No, I would be skeptical of that, but I think, one day I got to thinking about evil, and so I just typed into Google, because, somebody used the word evil, and I thought, no, I'm not sure if I believe in evil. And so I just typed into Google evil skepticism, and I found a page on Stanford University website talking about all these philosophers that don't believe that we should talk about things in terms of evil, because things like it is more explanatory to just say what someone did than to say that they're evil, like they're a murderer. You don't need to say they're evil. Or the whole problem of using evil kind of invokes a system of belief that you may or may not believe in or something. So I can find uses for skepticism everywhere.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because evil, people think of evil, well, some people like religious people especially will think of evil as being kind of like a fundamental force, and it's this there's good and there's evil. But for other people, it's a bit more relative, and it's a bit of an abstract concept in a way. Does evil have some kind of intent, and there's things that happen which don't have intent behind them that people might say are evil. So, I think whenever you get a word where the usage is confusing, it is like you just said. You just say what's happening, just describe what's actually going on, rather than trying to put a label on. Like, say this is evil. Say these children are being tortured.
Yeah. It's just a way to be more accurate and get rid of the stuff that doesn't do the good work.
One thing that actually really resonated with a lot of people from your thing in the book was when you said that you went to your friends and you told them you didn't believe 9/11 was an inside job anymore.
Yeah.
And this was you, wasn't it? They said like, "Are you a Republican now?" Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the guy I used to get some stuff from. Yeah. So he was pretty incredulous, and he couldn't believe that I didn't believe that stuff. And he hasn't been able to really talk to me since. This is another thing that happens. Yeah, as people kind of just break off communication with me because I think they don't think I'm part of their tribe or something anymore. There is a whole lot of camaraderie that's in conspiracy theory circles. Almost a spiritual camaraderie, I would call it. Rory kind of connected with that a little bit. And so, some people have just kind of shut me out. And it's sad to me, but also, there's like the Kermit the Frog meme about should I debunk this? And I should just debunk this. Like, that's kind of what I think. I'm like, oh, if I can just offer the truth, or not the truth, but just some information that the other person might not have, I should offer that information, whether or not the person's ready. And this is where I'm at, actually. I think I could do a better job at supporting people on an emotional level, which I'm not doing a very good job of that. Like, I'm kind of engaging with their intellect, but I'm forgetting to talk to them as a person, I guess, or,
So this guy that you talked to and you told him about 9/11 and then he kind of cut you off, would you go back and do it differently now?
Well, yeah, I would, because it didn't work.
Right. Round
I found
two.
A lot of things that didn't work.
What do you think went wrong, though? Were you just too abrupt? Were you kind of mocking it, or did he just come across wrong?
I didn't spend enough time caring for him. Like, I should have probably done a better job at, like, telling himself, like, hey, I love you, and I know the information that but I've discovered some new information, and maybe you ought to sit with me and let's take a look together. Like, that seems like I haven't been able to do that with a whole lot of people. I've tried, and, a lot of times when you're a conspiracy theorist, you have it's pretty easy to not get nailed down on something. You can switch to, like, the next topic really quick. So you're on 9/11 one moment, and then all of a sudden someone wants to talk to you about, hey, well, here's a story of how this passport could have gotten shot out of the other side of the building, and you're like, well, never mind, I want to talk about chemtrails now.
Yeah, or even just something else in the 9/11 sphere, because people have an endless list. Yeah,
and then also the difference between cynicism and skepticism has also become really seemingly important to me, and so there's this great Gillette pen video on YouTube where he talks about the difference between skepticism and cynicism, and he says that cynicism is questioning people's motivations and skepticism is questioning evidence. And also, that's a really good thing about your website, is basically you're not talking about, you can just forget about the question of what people's motivations are. Generally, I believe most people are good people. Just, like Keith was saying in your interview with him, you're trusting that thousands and thousands of people are not going to blow the whistle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do. I've relied on the kindness of strangers to get around this world, and I generally think most people are good. I can just get rid of the question of what are people's evil intentions and just look at what is the evidence presented. And I know a little bit better now than I used to. I know there's tons of room for improvement, but I know a little bit better about how to look something up. Like, I didn't used to know what confirmation bias was, and so I would just go, I have a doubt in my mind that controlled demolition was involved in Building 7, so I just Google controlled demolition Building 7,
Yeah.
And what do you know? I found all kinds of evidence for it. But, then...
That's something I've heard. Like, people have told me that they start to have doubts, and so they'll kind of run off and watch lots of videos that support their belief because they're feeling uncertain.
Right. And I never got into the video thing
that's interesting.
that much. I'm skeptical of videos because I think video does a real good job at bypassing our intellect and working on us on an emotional level, and I don't trust that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't watch any video news. I don't watch television. I work with video screens all day long, so I don't really care to watch screens when I get home. But I do play video games, and that reminds me of a question that I wanted to ask you, because you're a former video game programmer.
I am.
And what it is that I recently started to notice my behavior in a video game. I'm playing Red Dead Redemption, which is like a cowboy world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I started to notice myself looking at my character and kind of comparing my look of my character to the other characters in the game. And then I got to thinking, like, is there that? I think that's probably some kind of like evolutionary psychology, thing that works in our brains, where you're constantly comparing yourself to members of your tribe maybe and looking and seeing, well, how you compare. And that's just something I think our brains do. And so, but then the question I had for you, and I'm so glad we got to talk today, is do you think that there is an understanding of how video games might talk to that part of our brain from an evolutionary psychology point of view? Because you got these games like Minecraft, which are basically like how to survive in your environment, and they would appeal to that part of our brain that we evolved in order to survive in that environment. And so I just wonder if that's something that is known, or maybe you're too far away from it now. Or...
No, people definitely do think about psychology when they're designing video games. It was, kind of less so back in the early days because they were so simple. But as they got bigger and bigger and they get more and more money involved in it, people definitely do think about the psychology. I would think about what's going through the mind of the person when they encounter a certain thing. When I was designing video games, and I'm sure now there's probably people who consult with psychologists and things like that to figure out what's going on. Yeah, I was thinking it
would make a lot of sense to do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things that you see in games have kind of not evolved exactly, but they've kind of been filtered out by natural selection into the types of things that appeal to people on a primal level.
Yeah,
and
I think that is...
you enjoy a certain exploration, or you enjoy getting rewards. You enjoy discovering a cache of weapons, or a cache of food. The latest Zelda game on the Nintendo Switch has cooking in it. It has collecting food and cooking.
That is the best game I think I've seen so far. That is an amazing game.
Yeah, and it's almost like going back to the primitive roots of humankind, and that it's appealing directly to the evolved brain, which is all about surviving and
Yeah,
propagating your genes, I guess. And I guess that looking at other people thing is probably something to do with genetic diversity and seeing, like, are my genes better than his genes? Do I have a chance? Like, which female should I try to mate with? Which one is that guy
exactly.
going to mate with? Things like that. It's very simple primal things, which we don't have control over them. They're just natural things. You can't help
Right.
what your
And I
reaction
think,
is when you look at someone you find attractive.
yeah, yeah. And I think conspiracy theories kind of work with that same part of our brain a little bit, because like actual conspiracies, I think you would probably agree, are just kind of like the way that a lot of work gets done in the world. Like it's in football. I mean, it's in
Yeah.
everything.
Well, yeah,
There's,
corruption. Yeah,
yeah,
essentially.
corruption, of
Yeah.
course. I always forget to mention that, and then people think I just believe everything the government says, which I just think,
Yeah,
no, we
which
should start with
nobody
the
believes
absolute.
that.
Don't believe anything they say. Always check it. Uh, but I think that's also kind of part of that evolutionary brain where we're always kind of going,
Hmm.
how can I use a coalition to defeat that coalition or something like that? And so I mean, it makes sense to me that we're kind of predisposed to believe in these things because our brains are basically big threat detection machines that,
Yeah.
that's what they're trained to do, is look for problems.
Except that they don't look for problems on a global scale or a national scale, which is what conspiracies are. They're looking for
Yeah.
problems like within the tribe. So your brain is trying to apply these thought processes that work within a
Ah,
tribe, like, maybe that guy is stealing my food.
right.
Or the people across the other side of the hill are bad. We should protect ourselves against those people. Like these things, these very primitive things that work well when you're in a little tribal unit, they don't work well when you're operating on a broader scale and you're trying to think, what's the motivation of the government. When you were saying, it's the same way you're thinking about, well, whatever the tribal leader, 10,000 years ago. You're now thinking about the president, who has a completely different set of priorities to some guy who has a tribe with 50 people in it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because it's not the same situation, you get these primitive instincts and these primitive natural biases and predilections for things that worked in the past and now don't work. And this kind of corruption of those leads to things like conspiracy theories, I think. It's part of my theory anyway.
Yeah. So what do you think? I was just talking to my boss, and he was making fun of flat earthers today, and I was telling him that I don't think it's very useful to make fun of them or to call them dumb or anything. I said that they're probably just don't have access to all the information that you or I might think we have, and that
Hmm.
they're probably sincere truth seekers. And um, but what's your take? Is like, is that on the rise? Like flat Earth
It
belief?
it kind of is. I think it had its moment where it kind of bumped up, partly because of YouTube's algorithms, which they've kind of changed that now. If you look for flat Earth on YouTube, you don't get the flat Earth videos so much. You get articles from BuzzFeed or whatever about flat Earth. So I think it's kind of had its moment where there was this kind of, it went viral in a way, and a lot of people
Okay.
started looking at it. But I don't think there's anything other than that which is driving this interest in flat Earth. It's just this viral thing. But yeah, I think the flat Earth people, they encompass to a large extent the same range as ordinary people. You always talk about the bell curve distribution of things like intelligence and ability, and most people are in the middle. 99% of the people are, in a fairly, you know, not narrow but not particularly wide range in the middle, and then you've got like very intelligent people off to one side, and you've got a lot of people. Half of the people in the world are below average intelligence, which no one likes to think that they might be below average intelligence, but
I might be. I probably think people have intelligence.
and no one even likes to think that their friends might be below average intelligence as well, because it's kind of rubs off on you by association. So everyone thinks, oh yeah, I'm like, my IQ is 120 when the average IQ is 100. So obviously there's going to be lots of people out there who are not intelligent and they're not believers in the flat earth. Yeah,
Right.
the people who actually are in flat earth, a lot of them, I think they have reasonably high IQs. If anything,
Yeah.
they think a little bit too much.
Yeah. No, but those truths, once you see them for the first time, like I don't know math very well. And I look at some of those and they're very confusing. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, well, that does kind of make sense. And why is that? And, I do, believe in pictures from NASA and stuff. So I can easily say, that's a bunch of hooey. But some people, like the woman that you interviewed,
Yeah, Sasha.
yeah, she wanted to find out for herself, and that's respectable, I think.
It is, but if you can't do the math, then how are you going to do it? How are you
Well,
going to
then there's
determine what's real and
relying
what
on
isn't
experts.
if you don't really have the mental tools to do it? A lot of people feel like they should be able to figure it out, but they don't know the math, so that they can only get a certain distance along with the explanation, and then they can't figure out what the radius of the Earth is. So
Right.
what are they going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I just learned about something called it's not the illusory, it's like the illusion of you being able to explain something. And
Mm.
do you know what I'm talking about? People will say with high confidence they could tell you how a toilet works. And then when they try to explain how it works and then they can't, and they
Yeah,
will then say, "No, I'm not very confident in my ability to explain something." And so that
it's a
brings
great
up to me.
example, the toilet thing.
Yeah, it's the examples they give are a toilet, a zipper, and a ballpoint pen, which I can't tell you how any of those things work.
Yeah,
Actually.
anyone should go out and try to explain those if they think they're good at
Right,
understanding and explaining things.
right. But it brings up then why we should value people who are experts in their field
Hmm.
and authorities. And really, like, I think my old debate coach used to tell me that there's value to our national parks, even if you never go to them, because you just know they're there. And the same thing with experts in the field, like they're there. There are people who devote their whole life, like with climate change. There's a great communicator on climate change. Her name is Catherine Hayhoe, and she's accessible. Like I've sent her messages on Facebook, and she's replied with an expert opinion on
Yeah,
things.
that's great.
And so, yeah, I think people should understand that their sphere of influence is as big as anyone you can talk to. Like if you can talk to somebody, that's the person is in your sphere of influence. And and the same is true with experts. And you can call up David Keith and talk to him. And man, that was just a great interview. I loved it.
Yeah, David Keith is he's very accessible. He's an interesting. He's a target of conspiracy
Yeah,
theorists, and
yeah,
he's not afraid of talking to them. He will actually go and actually hold discussions with conspiracy theorists and try to explain things to them because he's a guy who he cares about people.
yeah,
He's concerned, I think, for the people themselves, but also for the harm that they might do. He's had death threats,
yeah.
which is pretty terrible. It's all based
Right.
on this complete misunderstanding, and people. I think the promoters of these conspiracy theorists really need to consider what they're doing. See, the thing is that these promoters think that they are correct. So, say Dane Wigington, he thinks that he is correct in saying that David Keith is part of some giant plot.
Right.
So, but he's causing harm, but from his perspective, he thinks he's doing the right thing, which makes it very, very difficult to you can't tell him, oh, don't be mean to David Keith, and he's saying, well, I'm
Yeah.
trying to save the world. What do you expect me to do? You've actually got to address his conspiracy theory, rather than just tell him to keep it to himself.
If he could only listen to David Keith's words, then maybe he could be
That's the thing.
turned.
Getting through to people, and with the flat Earth people, it's obviously very hard because they don't have the mental tools to understand things. So a lot of the flat Earth stuff is complicated. There's the math and the geometry involved. How high is the horizon? But some of the other stuff, like the chemtrails, isn't that complicated. There's this claim
No.
that Dane Wigington makes about high bypass jet engines.
Right.
He says that high bypass jet engines can't make contrails, and then he kind of gives this explanation in terms of science. He says, "Oh, well, most of the thrust comes from air, and the air wouldn't make contrails." Now, I guess I could see how people could not understand what the problem with that is, but the simple answer to why they make contrails is that the contrail is made by the jet exhaust. It isn't made by the thing that creates the thrust. It's not made by what's been pressed out. It's made out, the fuel is burnt, it creates exhaust, that gets shot out the back, and that mixes with the air, and that makes a contrail. But how do you get that across to people? I think
Well,
Dane Wigington has the tools, the mental tools to understand it, but he's completely resistant to listening to anything that will contradict his beliefs.
yeah, that's what the other guy you interviewed that didn't want to be shown. He remember he just
Paul,
said,
yeah.
he would just block every single comment and just pay it no mind, just block it and move on. So I mentioned that I have trouble now with the word truth and the term belief because it's hard for me to believe in anything
Yeah,
or
yeah.
or everything. Like I can believe in everything equally, or it's hard to believe in anything. What do you think about beliefs?
Well, yeah, beliefs is interesting. You familiar with epistemology?
That's the study of beliefs, right?
The study, yeah, it's the study of knowledge,
Oh, knowledge, okay.
which
Of
gets
course.
defined as justified true beliefs. So a belief is just simply something that you personally think it is true.
Right.
I think it is true that this pen is red. I know you can't see the pen, so you're going to have to trust it. Trust me with this. But I have a pen here. It is red. It looks red. I believe it to be red. I'm justified in this belief because the wavelengths of light that are hitting my eye are red, and it's actually true. It is actually a red pen. So this is knowledge. I have knowledge now that this pen is red. But then the epistemologists, the philosophers, they get into all these little linguistic tricks. Like, what if you believe something to be true, and it was actually true, but your reason for believing it was
It was
false?
false. Yeah, I've heard that
Yeah,
one.
like if you believe somebody was dead because you've read an obituary of them in the paper, but the obituary was wrong. It was actually about somebody else, but they were actually dead anyway.
Yeah,
It was just
right.
like another person of the same name was also dead. Do you know that person is dead? You have a belief which is true, and
For the wrong reasons.
it's not justified.
Right.
So I think you can tie yourself up in knots with these things, and it's a bit silly in a way because
Well, yeah,
you
I think that I really wanted to believe in a lot of stuff back when I was in the rabbit hole. Like I've kind of like parallel to Rory's story, I had a lot of religious and spiritual journeys with different paths. And at one point, I was just like, they're all part of one big path, man. And, kind of was willing to believe everything. Like, give me your beliefs. I can take them all in and I can hold them all in my brain or in my whatever. And I just really wanted to believe in everything. And the more extreme, the better, because it kind of gives you a little, oxytocin or something like that, serotonin.
yeah.
But now I just find it hard to believe in anything except for debunking.
It's like you were believing things without justification back then. You were believing things because they sounded like a good idea, like, and they seemed like good things to believe in.
Yeah.
And also just the openness to beliefs. I think some people feel, at that time in their lives, they feel that's a very positive thing. Like the flat Earth lady, Sasha.
Yeah.
She said like it was very liberating to believe in things, or like open her mind to the possibility of these things. And just this open-mindedness, people just really enjoy. Oh, I said, maybe this is true. Maybe this is true. I can believe anything now.
Yeah. Man, that reminds me of that website, The Mind Unleashed. So
Yeah.
sometimes I read some posts from that my friends share from The Mind Unleashed, and I'm like, no, you should not have a mind unleashed. You should have a mind on a leash for some of this stuff.
Well, I think it comes back to evidence, and that's what skepticism is about. I mean, skepticism basically means show me the evidence for this belief. It
Yeah,
means you don't accept a belief without evidence, without the justification for the belief. Truth, I think, is something that is hard to determine absolutely, but you can
yeah,
certainly look at what the evidence is. I have very good evidence about my red pen here.
right,
I could take a photograph of it and put it into Photoshop and click on it, and it will say red. I have very, very strong evidence for things like that, and we have very strong evidence that the world is a sphere, and we have very
right.
strong evidence that the fires and the impacts are what brought down the World Trade Center, and we have very strong evidence that the lines people see in the sky act exactly the same as contrails, because we know what contrails are like, and we know the physics of contrails and clouds and things. So we have all this evidence for these things. So it's fine to believe in them because they've got very
Yeah,
strong evidence. You can always have that doubt. You can always have that little iota of doubt where maybe it isn't true if some new evidence comes along. Maybe the evidence isn't 100%, maybe it's just 99%. But then that doesn't mean you should go off and believe in something else which only has 1% of evidence.
right.
Some silly theory like chemtrails. I don't want to call people silly, but the theory
Yeah, I
itself
wouldn't call people
is
silly.
really
Like
silly.
the one thing that David Keith said that I wish he didn't was that he said that they're not trying or willingly fooling themselves. I can't remember exactly how he
Mm.
said, but he did say that they're not trying. And I just know that, to somebody who believes in that conspiracy theory, that would be insulting to them, and
Yeah.
so wouldn't be super useful.
No, I think a lot of people who they feel like they've done a lot of research,
Yep.
and that's something they will say. I've done my research.
Right.
It's become a joke in a way. Like
It
go do
is.
your own research,
Right. When
and
it's like, hello, if I do any research, I'd gladly share it with anybody.
yeah,
It
and
doesn't make sense.
yes, it's a bit silly. Like telling a scientist to go do your own research. I mean, sure, he'll do his own research, but if
And
you
he'll
have
share
some
it with
research,
peers.
then let's hear it. Yeah, and it's kind of a get out of jail free card, like that people play when they don't want to continue the
Oh, yeah.
discussion.
Chill.
But it's also because the research that they have done is difficult to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a guy emailed me today, and he was trying to tell me about his theory about something to do with 9/11. Like there was six hijackers instead of five hijackers, and he said, "Just watch this video." And he sent me an hour and a half long video. And then I asked him to summarize it, and then he sent me this long explanation of what the video was about, and I still really didn't get it because it was just this long, kind of rambling explanation. I
Probably
mean,
talk to text and
yes,
no
well, it's like
punctuation.
no, it wasn't. It was reasonably well written,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think it was something that in his mind it made sense,
Right.
but because he's done all this research. He's watched all these loads and loads of videos, and these chemtrail people, they watch all these videos, and for them it makes sense. And then they try to explain it to you, and they can't. They say, "Oh, you got to watch, you got to
Right.
watch this video. You got to watch what is it, the shade video, and the what in the world are they spraying, and then you got to watch all these other videos, and then watch all of Dane Wigington's videos, and then read this book, and then you'll understand." So they can't communicate it to you because it's too much research in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's my experience too. I get this one guy that just sends me videos all the time, and I'm just like, I
Yeah.
won't watch your videos. Just
That's
tell
what
me
I
what
tell
the
them.
important part is, because I don't want to watch a 3 hour long video about lizard people or whatever. Um,
Yeah, but for them, it seems like the most important thing ever. Like this was a video that opened their mind to a fundamental truth that was hidden
It
to
is.
everybody.
And they use religious type language, this is the truth with a capital T, and they talk about, they say to me, you're crazy because you believe this, and I'm talking about something that I don't believe, but they translate that into, well, if you don't believe this, then you must believe the government always tells the truth or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't really been able to like get through to this one guy that I've been trying to talk to. So his line of demarcation would probably be all the way at 10.
Really?
Yeah, he's got the something about some Anukai religion involved with the Pope and some structure at the Vatican. It really looks like a serpent head or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's about as far down as you can go, but he runs the whole gamut. He's ex-military. He went to my high school. He's reasonably smart. I've talked to him on the phone, but he sees patterns in things also. Like he'll take a bunch of pictures of clouds and say, look, there's a dragon in this one. And he'll take pictures of like rock structures and say he sees like old parts of people in them and stuff,
Yeah.
So he's got like, I'm almost wondering like, should I be talking to this guy? Because maybe he might have some mental stuff going on, and I just wonder if
Yeah. I think, eventually, you do meet people who do have actual mental issues. I mean, sometimes they're just people who are, not neurotypical. They've got, their brain is just wired a bit differently, which isn't necessarily like this bad negative thing.
No, that's good. That's great.
But it can make them be, they see patterns in things where perhaps most people wouldn't see patterns. They'll sort of look at something and they'll see a pattern that isn't there because their brain is very active in the, connecting the dots department.
Yeah.
And so it makes them more susceptible to believing these types of things. And then they end up watching some videos that connect the dots for them, and then they're kind of lost down the rabbit hole. And that can be very difficult to deal with when someone really has, something in their brain going on that you can't really reason past that. It's a tricky thing to deal with. And, I'm no expert in that type of thing. So I kind of have to say, leave it to the experts if that's what's actually going on.
Right.
It's like with your friend though. Like, is it actually worth attacking them? Not attacking them, but like attacking their beliefs. Like if someone that was very devoutly religious, and their religion meant so much to them. From my perspective, most religions are, I wouldn't say they're irrational, but I think they're wrong. Everybody's.
I wouldn't challenge anybody's religious.
No, and I have lots of religious relatives, and I'm not going to be trying to convert them to atheism because I know it's just such a fundamental part of their lives, and I think if it's not harming them, then what's the benefit in destroying part of their belief system? Right. But if it is harming them, like these people who believe in conspiracy theories that are harmful, then yeah, I can see that. But if your friend is believing something that essentially is a religion, then it's perhaps over the line in what you should address. What you got to do a cost benefit analysis. Would this person and would you and your relationship with this person benefit from attempting to debunk it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't debunk his spiritual beliefs. Like he gets a spiritual camaraderie with the people that share his views. I understand just from seeing his interactions online. Like, he'll post these pictures of random things. He'll draw in the clouds and say, "See, there's the dragon right there," and people will, "Oh, you're so amazing! What a blessed thing."
Yeah, I've seen groups like that on Facebook, and they're very supportive of each other.
That's the thing, and I don't want to mess with that because that seems positive to me. But the part that seems bad is where, well, he's even a QAnon guy too, and so he's very sure of that one that we're going to see.
Yeah, well, that's low level on the conspiracy scale. So
that's low level, huh? I would think that would be like way over to number 10.
I'd say it's in the middle, I guess, because it is kind of a bit strange, but it's kind of in a way, almost mainstream as well, because you see these QAnon people on TV and they're attending Trump rallies, and they're, in some ways, they're just ordinary voters who are big fans of Trump who think that this is a great thing that he's doing. They're kind of low information people. They don't really have much understanding of the world. But then, some of them do. It's kind of weird. You talk to them online, and they sometimes know quite a bit about politics, and yet they've got this weird idea. It's I need to talk to more QAnon people. They're an interesting bunch, especially now that I think QAnon is basically is going away. He hasn't really posted for a while, and 8chan is being shut down, and maybe 4chan too. So,
wait,
not sure.
So QAnon hasn't been doing releases or whatever that is?
Yeah, the breadcrumbs. I think
Really?
I think it's decreased a lot. I'm not really familiar. I saw.
Is that because the Mueller investigation came out and it really wasn't about arresting?
Yeah, I think maybe it's run its course.
Okay.
There's some guy behind it. Some person behind it who's just pulling the strings. Yeah, it's like a bunch of people doing it, and they've been having a lot of fun.
Right. It's interactive, right? Because you can kind of become part of this thing.
It is. It's a game. It's a LARP, as they say, live action role playing.
Okay.
It's people enjoy doing it. They enjoy going and in the morning and figuring out what the clues are. It's like doing the crossword. It's this fun intellectual thing, and they also think they're part of this amazing thing which is saving the world.
Right.
Which, if they could actually step back and look at it, it makes no sense whatsoever. But like I say, with everything from their perspective, it makes perfect sense. And so you've got to try to figure out how do you talk about it from their perspective in a way that makes sense. Yeah, I think it'll just run out of steam though. Nothing is coming true.
Right.
So,
it doesn't seem like on the low information thing. Like I now consider myself a high information person, but I think I used to be a lower information person.
Or at least limited. Like you have a limited set of information. You could be very high information, and then you get a lot of information from a very narrow set of sources. That you could be an expert on everything that Alex Jones talks about.
Yeah, you can do that. I think it's just always better to have more information. You can always reject the information, but I just think I'm not like what's her name that's just like, oh, I'm open to every idea. I'm not open to every idea, but I will look at sources and consider like questions of media literacy now, where I didn't question any of that stuff. Like I looked up the story of Rents after I stopped believing in conspiracy theories, and that's just oh my god, what a shit show.
Jeff Rense.
Yeah, Jeff Rense, man. Just some weird stuff. And so I think one of the aspects of coming out of the rabbit hole also is that I pay more attention to where am I getting my media. I constantly am looking stuff up. Like if I see something that might just, rings a bell or just kind of tugs at me the wrong way, I'll have 20 or 30 tabs open in my browser at all times because I'm looking stuff up constantly. I follow Snopes on Facebook just so I have a constant stream of what the latest Snopes things are. And so I'm and I try to get all that stuff in my social media. So I'm constantly engaged with questions about what is this disinformation? Is this misinformation? Is this good information? That kind of thing. And so,
that's great. Just checking, not just checking things, but having lots of information coming in. I try to look at lots of different news sources. I look at Fox News, and I look at CNN, I look at Breitbart, and I look at MSNBC. So you got to look at all the information so that not only what's real in the world, but also what other people think is real in the world.
Yeah, that's a good part. It reminds me of a point in your book where you talk about the Trump making fun of the disabled reporter. And refresh my memory, it wasn't that he wasn't really doing that. Is that
It is unclear, but it was one of these issues where the people who are not fans of Trump, they think it was like really obvious, like he was the guy who he had I can't remember what it's called, agraphily or something, some disease that makes wastes his limbs, and so his arms were twisted, and Trump was kind of making a kind of gesture where his hands were flopping around that looked like he was mimicking this guy.
Yeah.
Now, and the liberals think that, this is Trump being a horrible, evil people, and there's a meme that goes around that says, like, I can't understand why this wasn't the end of it. Because everyone thinks,
exactly.
like, well, he did this horrible thing, why didn't that just end it? But all the Trump supporters, they say, that's been debunked. So, in their minds, it was just this kind of, this fake news thing from the mainstream media, and they cite the fact that he actually made very, very similar hand movements when he was making fun of Ted Cruz.
Okay.
He was saying, "Oh, Ted Cruz doesn't know what he's talking about," and he was waving his hands around in the same way. And so they pass it off as just being something that he does sometimes whenever he's making fun of anybody. He waves his hands around like this. And so in the mind of the Trump supporter, it's this thing where they think that he did nothing wrong. In the minds of the liberal, they think it's this horrible, evil thing. And you never get one side understanding where the other side is coming from. The Trump supporters think that the liberals are being duped by the mainstream media.
Right, they talk about that constantly.
Yeah, the liberals think that Trump supporters are just brainwashed idiots because they believe that it was fake news when on their minds it obviously wasn't. I mean, if you go to Snopes and look it up, they mark it as unclear, like partially true or dubious. And if you go to PolitiFact, they have a similar assessment. Now, I think that he probably was mocking him, but it's hard to tell.
Right, and there's something called the need for cognitive closure that I recently learned about, and some people have a real short time frame where they will allow themselves to feel like there's no closure on the subject, and then other people have very open amount of time, like the jury's out on that, I don't know, is an acceptable answer to some of those people. And so I'm okay with, like, I don't have a serious need for cognitive closure on stuff like that. It's okay that it's kind of fuzzy, and that's just okay. On that fake news thing, though, one of the things that really bothers me about how that has become part of the, I guess you would say, like, lexicon or something, is that it just allows people to respond to something they don't like with just that term, and there's absolutely no critical thinking at all happening when people just say, "Oh,
And people say, that's been debunked." If it's something that they don't like, they'll say, "Oh, well, Snopes has been debunked." So if you send me any article from Snopes as a whole has been debunked. Therefore,
they don't accept Snopes as anything, because
the Metabunk has been debunked.
Right, there's websites that have you as some horrible person. And
well, we've been talking for over an hour now, so this has been great, though. It's been very, very interesting, and it's been really good catching up with you again. Is there anything you want to finish out with? Any points you think we didn't cover?
No. I love the new podcasts. They're entertaining, and I've tried to share them with my conspiracy friends, because I think it's the topic is right in their ballpark, and I think it could do some good.
Well, tell them they can come on the podcast. Find the most eloquent one of your friends and send them over, or anybody who will come on the podcast. I'll be happy to talk to any of them.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Willie. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mick. Have a good day.